In 1996, Quake was released, and although it didn't have the same monumental impact as Doom, being overambitious and a troubled development, in its own right, it still proved something. With high praise and review scores, id Software's venture into fully 3D games was a success. Then, a young Gabe Newell was inspired to follow in their footsteps, met with id, and walked out with their engine. It was then modified and turned into GoldSrc, the engine that powered Half-Life, demonstrating how video games can be an immersive experience. Although showing its age today, it was incredible at the time, featuring concepts that were thought to be impossible, like skeleton-based animations to create real-time cinematic sequences. And of course, a necessary addition, while trivial, is multiplayer. I'm sure we all know the story of how it all came to be. Much like id, Valve gave their community the tools to mod the game, leading to tons of other derivative works. Some took it a step further, to create a different experience. You know the classics: Counter-Strike, Team Fortress Classic, and forgotten titles like Gutman Chronicles. Moreover, this was all developing at the turn of the millennium. The internet was starting to become commonplace, and it's where modding thrives as creative works are distributed quicker, getting feedback and refining your craft is much more feasible. Despite Valve improving their engines and continuing to evolve, the community for GoldSrc is still yet to die. There is a niche dedicated to using this engine for creative output. Of course, as charming as its default state is, inevitably someone will try to push boundaries. After so much time has passed, learning and exploiting it, plus the capabilities of modern machines, there are feats achieved that were never thought to be possible before. A novel concept, of course, considering every engine with enough given time can be pushed to its limits. GoldSrc is over 20 years old. At this point, you would think everything has been done. So the question is, where is the end? Just like a speedrun, it's all about optimization for the best result possible. How much crazier can it get before there is truly nothing left? Let's see. Half-Life itself is probably the best place to start. I cannot overstate how much there is to unravel. From custom maps to entire campaigns, there is passion and inspiration everywhere. Absolute Redemption, Azure Sheep, Point of View, Half-Life Zombie Edition, Residual Life, Edge of Darkness, and one of the most famous mods you might be familiar with, They Hunger, a total conversion. Given your arsenal is similar to the default one, same goes for enemies, but it's all fine-tuned to separate from its origin, with a horror theme like no other. It really stood out from the crowd. Then there's also Sven Co-op. Initially created as a mod by Daniel Sven Viking Fearon, it has since evolved into a standalone title with a strong focus on multiplayer co-op, as the name suggests. It also includes some enhancements. These are all great examples so far, yet we need something bigger, more contemporary. I know someone wants me to bring up MMod. It's very recent, but the aim is to overhaul Half-Life's gameplay and effects, while leaving a lot as it is. A great expansion, but I think we can go deeper than this. Now, without further ado, I would like to formally present what I consider the culmination of everything. Echoes. You play as Candidate 12, going about your day at Black Mesa. The resonance cascade happens, now go survive. Deja vu much, yes, but there is actual lore and cutscenes. More importantly, this mod is gorgeous. All the bells and whistles are here, location is familiar yet outstanding, and the amount of detail put into every corner will send a Windows XP machine into a coma. Developers have truly gone above and beyond. HD textures, lighting effects, and even custom animations. Visual eye candy aside, gameplay and level design are nothing to scoff at. It's exactly what you would expect, but the world feels much more alive and cinematic. For a mod, it's decently long too. While locations end up repeating themselves, there is a different twist each time, so it doesn't become redundant. In the end, Echoes is truly a remarkable achievement. I very much recommend.
Until we meet again.
In another universe, we have Counter-Strike, and this is where things become next level. There's no shortage of custom models and skins. Maps, on the other hand, is what we are looking for. Although level design is constricted to a small box compared to the elaborate campaigns with writing, voice acting from previous mods, mappers have managed to make the most of it with staggering results. It starts with expansions of existing maps, then texture swaps, and finally, completely original works. Coming from Western China, we have DE Beishan, designed for a mapping gem with a competitive layout. It will blow your mind. Fine details aside, ambient lighting is what really sticks out. Sure, it's baked in because this is what the engine can do, effective nonetheless. The cherry on top I haven't seen before is the double-layered sky so the clouds can move. Another impressive aspect is the background, which, as opposed to just being a skybox texture like most maps, there is what I would assume a giant 3D object to represent the mountains and river. Overall, if you show this map to me with no context, I will probably never guess this is GoldSrc. Next up in the Asian region is KA Rising Sun. Yes, a knife arena map of all things, relatively small and concise. The reason I wanted to showcase it is mostly the lighting. The custom texture work and detail are incredible in of themselves, featuring another use of a 3D backdrop, this time being more complex with trees layered about. But the bloom is the cleverest thing I have ever seen. Trickery involves a ball of light which expands and becomes slightly more transparent the further away you get from it, and together with the background sunset becomes very effective. With all that in mind, here is DE Dust 2 2020. Yes, I know, it always comes back around to Dust 2. Nonetheless, it's the best example I could find. HD textures all over the place with an unnecessary amount of detail at every corner. Shadows and god rays for immersion, then sound effects and breakable props scattered about. Exploring is an adventure. No, I did not clip out of bounds for these areas. There are ladders and climbable crates everywhere. It's that open. In a multiplayer setting, it might be too chaotic, so there is a more traditional version if you want. Overall, I think Dust 2 2020 is a pure demonstration of pushing limits at only 40 megabytes in size. Okay, what about a setting in which everything possibly customizable is combined? I have just the thing for you then. Modded servers. Not just a game mode with gimmicks, but a complete visual transformation. They are niche, but do exist out there. The best I could find is CSGO mod. Not the most original, and sure, parts of it are rather janky, but it's as faithful as it gets. I don't necessarily recommend it, unless maybe your PC can't run CS2, so this is a compromise. Still admirable, someone took the time to modify and make this mod work in multiplayer. Now I think it's time to go even further. How about entire games? Day of Defeat and CS Condition Zero come to mind, with the latter being a slightly expanded version of the engine, allowing for improved textures and details, but I'm afraid these were never truly utilized to their fullest. Earlier I mentioned total conversions, and there are a lot. Unfortunately, just like They Hunger, resemblance to the original they are based on is inevitable, but here are the ones that deviate the most. Paranoia is worth a mention, putting you in the shoes of a Russian officer sent to an industrial complex on a mission that takes an unexpected turn for the worst. The campaign is decently long and engaging, with an arsenal that gravitates more towards Counter-Strike. Despite being another total conversion that avoids conventional relation to Half-Life, it does bear resemblance to others of a similar kind. Maybe this trend is just a Russian thing, I don't know. All in all, it's definitely worthy of being a standalone title. It does use a different renderer to bypass certain limits, but I think it counts nonetheless. Afraid of Monsters is a classic example, starring David Leatherhoff, a struggling addict going through a mental crisis. The setting is a creepy hospital, and you are surrounded by twitching zombies. The goal is to make it out alive. There's a twist to the ending, but even though it's an older mod, it's still worth playing. The environment and set pieces take inspiration from Half-Life, but really ramps it up. A great mod, though a vast improvement to it, is the successor, made by the same people. The big daddy of them all, Cry of Fear. Started as a mod, now a standalone game, it's one of the most critically acclaimed survival horrors out there. And yes, it's still running on GoldSrc. Of course, it does take the more advanced OpenGL renderer of Paranoia and other modifications, but in a lot of ways, it doesn't stray away too much. It's vague and unnerving. You know relatively just as much as the protagonist, Simon Henriksson. As you progress, things eventually spiral out of control with horrible, nightmarish creatures chasing you around. Perhaps it's the darkness that lessens the detail, making the game look better than it is. Nonetheless, it adds to the dreadful, liminal ambience. Cry of Fear is proof you don't need it to be on the cutting edge to make a good game. With all that said, did we find the end? Is this all GoldSrc can offer before it becomes redundant and trivial? With its capabilities becoming more apparent, limit breakers are necessary. Is there nowhere else to go from here? Has it been exhausted? I don't think it's unfair to suggest there isn't anything left to exploit and rearrange, but that hasn't stopped passionate developers from continuing to try. Black Mesa Classic is a demake of the acclaimed Source Engine fan remake. Signal Lost is a reimagining of the Half-Life chapter uplink. Of course, these mods use even more expansions to the base engine. Signal Lost uses Zash 3D, an open-source 3D engine compatible with GoldSrc. This goes beyond just a better renderer, so from here a different question arises. Is it even the same anymore? With such modifications to the base, an amalgamation comes to life that hardly resembles the original. Maybe that is a wrong assumption, as from what remains, there could be something reborn in a much better condition than before, an evolution of sorts. It will all unfold as time moves on. Ultimately, I think for now the end of this decades-long ride is still yet to reach its final destination. And on that note, I will depart from this place. I'm actually supposed to be rearranging my collection of soda cans because that is totally what normal people do these days, right? Come on.